Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Today I'm here with Mike Buckholdt, the CEO at Kinex Medical. How are you, Mike?
Great, Jared. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for us to chat. I'd love if you could kick things off for our audience by telling them a little bit about your background, and then we'll talk a little more about, we have a couple topics we want to talk here today, but after that, it'd be great to hear more about Kinex Medical.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm currently the president and CEO of Kinex. My background is in physical therapy. I started off my career as a inpatient physical therapist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I worked on the inpatient side for many years, both on the acute care side, spinal cord rehab, all various aspects of acute care. I then made the switch to outpatient, where I was involved in a handful of outpatient PT clinics for about 7 years. And then in 2011, I joined Kinex as their president and CEO.
Thank you for sharing. And one of the things I'd love you quickly dive into is you already talked a little bit about this just kind of within the initial intro, but every guest I have on here for these, like we kind of call these intros because this is the first time you're on the podcast with us. And I think you said this was your first podcast appearance ever, right?
That is correct. First one.
Even more excited. That we love that. Well, hopefully we can have you on again then soon. Can you talk us through the why, how, what of the company? 3 things I always like to focus on when I have these conversations.
Sure. So why Kinex Medical? I would say that Kinex Medical is a full service orthopedic DME company. So we really specialize in orthopedics. So if you think about it, anything that a physician may want to order from a DME standpoint, we can provide. So instead of having a handful of representatives for different products, you've got one single source that's delivering equipment to people's homes, troubleshooting, 24 hours a day on call, handles anything that a patient might need following orthopedic surgery.
And one of the things I wanted to kind of quickly switch over to was around this topic. We're going to be talking about this quite a bit today. Is tele-rehab, and I know this is the big focus for the company. Can you talk us through basically how tele-rehab is able to improve patient satisfaction and compliance?
Sure, absolutely. So it's funny, as a PT, I've had 25 years of experience rehabbing patients. And when I think back 20 years ago, obviously this wasn't possible. But nowadays, as length of stay continues to get shorter and shorter, and there's a lot of compression, even in the physical therapy world, of getting to physical therapy, having capitations on the number of visits that people have, having consistency amongst providers. So having the same PT every time, it does get increasingly difficult. And so the ability to rehab at home from a quality standpoint, where not only are you performing the exercises, doing them correctly, being able to ask questions, but the key is monitoring and making sure that the patients are actually doing what they're supposed to from a compliance standpoint, and staying on top of the rehab is incredibly powerful, especially in today's age.
And can you kind of transition that, Mike, to talking a little bit through how it's also able to deliver basically these quality outcomes and a higher ROI?
Sure, absolutely. So for example, like with our product, the Kinex Connect, what we do is we've got a tablet-based continuous passive motion device, and so what we're doing is we're able to monitor the patient's range of motion, especially early on. A lot of times, if you see now, especially in the pandemic, people are getting total knee replacements in ambulatory surgery centers, and so they're coming in, they're having surgery, and they're leaving within 24 hours. Oftentimes, they're going home where they don't have access to physical therapy that's tied to the hospital. So the ability for the physician to monitor the patient to make sure that not only are they progressing in their rehab, but more importantly, almost, is that they don't have any adverse reactions. So a potential for blood clot or stiffness in the knee, uncontrolled pain, for example, anything that may cause a patient to come back in unnecessarily is incredibly important. And so the ability not only to make sure that the patient is progressing, but recovering satisfactorily without having to come back into the hospital is incredibly important.
And I mean, you've mentioned some of this that would probably lead into this pretty well, but why essentially is there a growing need to implement like a tele-rehab program and remote patient monitoring? Um, really, like I know you mentioned a little bit about how it's able to help with this, and in terms of improving patient satisfaction and also ROI, but like why do you see this need continuing to grow throughout the industry?
So if you think about the number of total knees, the surgeries that are going to happen over the next 10 years, I want to say the number is pretty staggering. It's like 180% growth over the next 10 years. So you do have capacity issues where it's hard for patients even to get into physical therapy. Even when I was practicing, it wasn't uncommon for a patient to have to wait 2 weeks before they get into their initial PT visit, which really in a total knee case is way too long. Oftentimes, when someone needs PT, they need it now. So the ability to provide quality rehab virtually through tele-rehab that's timely in the comfort of people's own homes and still be able to demonstrate a successful outcome is incredibly important.
Now, what areas of the industry do you still see that obviously strides have been made, but that we need to continue to as an industry as a whole, right? This isn't just your company or anything. Like, what are some things that like really excite you about where the industry as a whole is heading?
I mean, it's incredible what you can monitor and manage remotely these days. Obviously, I'm in orthopedics, and so the progress and the innovation in orthopedics has been really impressive. But I mean, even across the board, when you look at the cardiac monitoring that can occur, the neurologic area, even the sleep apnea studies and the things that are being done in the homes, the ability to monitor patients safely in their homes and get data and outcomes is really exciting for the future.
What's next, Mike, for Kinex Medical?
For us, we recently produced this market report, which really demonstrated the need for telerehab and to highlight some of the innovation that we're doing. We're really excited to grow with the industry. We started this a few years before the pandemic because we felt like this was the direction that orthopedics was heading. Ever since the pandemic, I mean, we have patients that have gone to doctors when given the option between PT and our Kinex Connect product to go with the Kinex Connect. One, because they were afraid to go back into PT clinics amongst other people for fear of catching COVID. The second is even just look at the weather this week, for example. You have 100 million people that were affected by this snowstorm that was blowing across the country. When I think about people in their, call it 70s and 80s, even in their 60s, that have to get into a car and drive through snowy conditions and ice just to get to PT, if there was an option like the Kinex Connect that allowed them to rehab in their own home safely and not have to get into a car and drive through bad conditions, potentially put themselves at risk for COVID exposure. It's very exciting. We feel like we definitely have a niche and a variable in the orthopedic space.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for sharing some thoughts on the company, giving us your why, how, what, telling us kind of what you're thinking as far as the state of the industry and the importance of telerehab. And hopefully, we can have you on again soon. We can talk. We can talk through more of what's happening in the space and what's happening with the company.
Sounds great, Jared. Thanks so much for having me.